I've never been one for handouts. At 67 years old, my calloused hands are a testament to decades of honest work. Construction, mostly. For 43 years, I poured concrete, erected scaffolding, and built the homes where other families would create their memories, all while trying to provide for my own. The morning everything changed started like any other. My joints protested as I eased myself out of bed in my modest two-bedroom home in Riverdale, a working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Detroit. The house wasn't much, but I'd paid off the mortgage 5 years ago, a fact I took immense pride in. The kitchen faucet was dripping again, another item on my never-ending list of repairs. At my age, things that once took an hour now took a day, but I'd be damned if I was going to call a plumber for something I could fix myself. My wife, Sarah, had passed away 3 years ago after a brief but brutal battle with pancreatic cancer. The medical bills had eaten through most of our savings, forcing me to come out of retirement and pick up part-time work at a local hardware store. The pay was minimal, but it kept the lights on and gave me something to do besides stare at the empty chair across from mine at the dinner table. I had 2 children, Michael, 42, who worked as a financial advisor in Chicago, and Jessica, 38, who taught elementary school just across town. Michael visited twice a year, usually around Christmas and my birthday in July. Jessica stopped by more frequently, bringing my grandchildren Emma and Liam every other weekend. They were my world now, the light that kept me going. My morning ritual was simple: coffee, black 1 sugar, toast with peanut butter, and the Detroit Free Press spread across my kitchen table. I'd circle job postings out of habit, even though I knew most places wouldn't hire someone my age for anything beyond greeting customers at a big box store. Still, it felt good to pretend I had options. The kitchen phone rang, an old landline I refused to give up despite Michael's constant nagging about joining the 21st century. It was Jessica. "Dad, I need a favor," she said, her voice strained. "The babysitter cancelled and I have a parent-teacher conference I can't reschedule. Could you watch the kids tonight? Just for a couple of hours?" "Of course, sweetie," I replied without hesitation. "Bring them over whenever you need. You're a lifesaver. I'll drop them off around 5. There was a pause. "Oh, and Dad," Michael called. "He's coming in this weekend. Something about needing to talk to you about arrangements." My stomach tightened. Arrangements? His words, not mine. "I think he's worried about you living alone." After we hung up, I stared at the coffee growing cold in my mug. Michael had been pushing for me to sell the house and move into an independent living community for months now. What he really meant was that he was tired of worrying about his old man and wanted to wash his hands of the responsibility. Not that he took much responsibility to begin with. I shuffled to the bathroom, wincing at the pain in my left knee. Another souvenir from decades of kneeling on concrete. The face in the mirror looked older every day. Weathered skin, grey stubble, eyes that had seen too much hardship, but they were still clear and determined. I wasn't ready to be put out to pasture yet. At 4 o'clock, I closed up the hardware store and drove my 2006 Ford F-150 home. The truck had 210,000 miles on it, but it still ran well enough. Michael had offered to help me buy a new one last Christmas, but I knew what strings would be attached to that gift. Accept the new truck, and suddenly I'd be expected to consider his suggestions about my living situation more seriously. Jessica arrived with the kids at 5:15, looking frazzled but grateful. Emma, 10, immediately ran to hug me, while Liam, 7, was more interested in asking if I still had those chocolate chip cookies he liked. "Dad, thank you so much," Jessica said, kissing my cheek. "I shouldn't be more than 2 hours. Oh, and," she lowered her voice, "go easy on Michael when he visits. He means well." I grunted non-committally. Jessica gave me a look that said she knew exactly what I was thinking, then hurried out the door. The evening with my grandchildren was the brightest part of my week. Emma showed me her science project, a detailed model of the solar system, while Liam challenged me to endless rounds of Go Fish. For those few hours, the aches in my joints subsided, and the weight of loneliness lifted from my shoulders. When Jessica returned, she found us all on the couch, the kids dozing against me as we watched an old Western on TV. "They weren't any trouble, were they?" she whispered. "Never," I replied, carefully extracting myself without waking them. "I made them dinner. Hope you don't mind mac and cheese." "Dad, you didn't have to do that. It's nothing fancy, just the boxed kind." Jessica gathered the sleeping children, thanked me again, and promised to bring them back next weekend. After they left, the house felt emptier than before, the silence more pronounced. Friday arrived, and with it came Michael. He pulled up in his shiny BMW, looking every bit the successful businessman in his tailored suit and designer watch. He hugged me briefly on the porch, his cologne too strong, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Dad, good to see you," he said, stepping inside and immediately frowning at the stack of mail on the side table, the slightly worn furniture, the outdated kitchen visible from the entryway. "How have you been managing?" "Just fine," I replied, leading him to the living room. "Coffee?" "No, thanks." He sat on the edge of the sofa, looking uncomfortable to be in the house where he grew up. "Dad, I wanted to talk to you about something important." I lowered myself into my recliner, bracing for what was coming. "I've been doing some research," Michael continued, pulling out a glossy brochure from his briefcase. "There's this wonderful place called Sunset Acres just outside Ann Arbor. It's an active adult community with everything you could need. Full-time staff, medical facilities on site, social activities. A nursing home," I said flatly. Michael sighed dramatically. "It's not a nursing home, Dad. It's independent living. You'd have your own apartment, but there would be people checking on you, making sure you're okay. After that fall you had last winter, I slipped on ice. It happens to people of all ages. You were alone for 2 hours before Mrs. Henderson from next door found you." I shifted uncomfortably, remembering the cold seeping through my clothes as I lay there, unable to reach the phone, my hip bruised but thankfully not broken. "I'm fine now, and I've been more careful." Michael leaned forward, his expression a practiced mix of concern and condescension that he probably used on clients who weren't making the financial decisions he recommended. "Dad, be reasonable. This house is too big for you. The maintenance alone is—" "This is my home," I interrupted, my voice sharper than intended. "Your mother and I saved for years to buy it. We raised you and your sister here. Every nail, every board has my sweat in it from the renovations I've done." "And it's falling apart," Michael countered. "The roof needs replacing. The plumbing is ancient. And you can barely manage the stairs on bad days." "I manage just fine." "No, you don't," Michael said, exasperation creeping into his tone. "Every time I call, you're struggling with something new. The yard work, the repairs, the bills, you need help for everything now." The words stung more than he could know. Was that how he saw me? A helpless old man who couldn't take care of himself? "I don't need anyone's help," I said quietly, the anger building in my chest. "And I'm certainly not selling my house to move into some overpriced dormitory for old folks just because it would make your life more convenient." Michael stood up, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "This isn't about convenience, Dad. It's about what's best for you. I'm worried. Jessica is worried. We don't want to get a call someday that something happened and no one was around to help. I have neighbors, I have friends, who are all getting as old as you are. Mrs. Henderson is what, 75? What's she going to do next time you fall, throw her back out trying to help you up?" We went back and forth like this for another hour, neither of us giving ground. Eventually, Michael announced he had dinner reservations with an old college friend and would be staying at a hotel downtown rather than in the guest room that was always ready for him. "Think about it at least," he said at the door, handing me the brochure. "For Mum's sake, if not for your own." It was a low blow, invoking Sarah like that. She had always been our mediator, smoothing things over when Michael and I butted heads. Without her, the gap between us only seemed to widen. After Michael left, I sat alone in my recliner, turning the glossy brochure over in my hands without opening it. On the cover, smiling seniors played golf and sat in perfectly manicured gardens. It was a fantasy, a sanitized version of aging that ignored the indignities, the loss of independence, the feeling of being discarded by society. The next morning, still seething from Michael's visit, I drove to Morty's convenience store at the corner of Elm and Washington, where I'd been buying my weekly lottery ticket for 20 years. It was a ritual more than a genuine hope of winning, my $2 a week to dream a little. Morty, now in his 70s himself, greeted me with his usual nod. "The usual, Frank? Make it 2 tickets today, Morty. I'm feeling lucky." I wasn't, but something in me wanted to spend an extra $2 out of spite, as if buying an additional ticket was some kind of rebellion against Michael's financial advice. "Big jackpot this week," Morty commented as he printed my Mega Millions tickets. $315 million. Not that it matters much to guys like us, eh? What would we even do with that kind of money at our age? I chuckled, tucking the tickets into my wallet. Buy a whole lot of peace and quiet, that's what. I spent the rest of Saturday puttering around the house, fixing that leaky faucet, and pretending I hadn't noticed how my hands trembled slightly as I worked the wrench. On Sunday, Michael stopped by briefly before heading back to Chicago, our conversation stiff and formal. He promised to call more often and reminded me again about Sunset Acres. I promised to think about it, knowing full well I wouldn't. Wednesday evening, I was half dozing in front of the TV when the Mega Millions drawing came on. I almost didn't bother checking my tickets. I never won more than $20 in all my years playing, but something made me reach for my wallet and pull out the 2 tickets, smoothing them against my knee as the numbered balls bounced around on screen. The first number matched, then the second, the E. By the third match, I was sitting upright, heart pounding. Fourth, fifth, and finally the gold mega ball, all matching perfectly on my second ticket, the extra one I'd bought out of spite after Michael's visit. I stared at the television in disbelief as the announcer confirmed there was a single winning ticket sold in Michigan. I checked and rechecked the numbers, convinced I was seeing things, but no, they matched, all of them. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the ticket. $315 million. It was incomprehensible. I'd need to get to the lottery office to confirm, but if this was real... I didn't sleep that night. I paced my small house, the winning ticket locked in Sarah's old jewelry box, my mind racing with possibilities. By morning, I had made a decision. No one would know about this win. Not yet. Not until I had figured out what to do, how to handle it. Not until I had seen how people would treat me if they didn't know I had money. I called in sick to the hardware store for the first time in 3 years, then contacted a lawyer, not one of Michael's country club friends, but a respected elder law attorney from downtown Detroit, whose name I'd seen in the newspaper. I made an appointment for that afternoon, giving no details over the phone. Margaret Winters was in her late 50s, with steel-gray hair and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. I explained my situation, showing her the ticket and watching her eyebrows rise nearly to her hairline. "Mr. Donovan, this is substantial," she said, understating the obvious. "Before we proceed, I want to be clear. Winning this amount of money will change your life in ways you cannot anticipate, not all of them good. I'm starting to realize that," I replied, thinking of Michael's words. "You need help for everything now." Over the next 2 hours, Ms. Winters outlined my options. In Michigan, lottery winners of large prizes cannot remain anonymous, but we could create a trust to receive the funds, offering some layer of privacy. She advised taking the lump sum option rather than the annuity, given my age, though it would reduce the amount to about $175 million before taxes. After federal and state taxes, I'd be looking at roughly $110 million, more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. "Do you have family, Mr. Donovan?" she asked, making notes. "A son and daughter, 2 grandchildren. And do you want to provide for them with these funds?" I hesitated, thinking of Michael's condescension, but also of Jessica's struggles as a single mother on a teacher's salary. "Some of them, but I want to be careful. I don't want this money to change things for the worse." Ms. Winters nodded knowingly. "I've seen what sudden wealth can do to families. Let's create a plan that protects you and allows you to help your loved ones on your terms." By the time I left her office, we had a strategy in place. The Frank Donovan Living Trust would claim the prize. I would tell no one for at least 30 days, using that time to set up proper accounts, make secure investments, and prepare for the publicity that would inevitably come. Ms. Winters would handle everything for a reasonable fee that now seemed like pocket change. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a strange double life. I continued working at the hardware store, continued driving my old truck, continued living in my modest house. But inside, everything had changed. I looked at the world differently, knowing I could buy almost anything in it. Michael called twice during those weeks, each time circling back to the topic of Sunset Acres. During our last call, his patience finally snapped. "Dad, I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this," he said, not bothering to hide his frustration. "Jessica and I are trying to help you." "I don't recall Jessica pushing me to sell my house," I replied. "She's too soft-hearted to say what needs to be said. Someone has to be practical here." "And that's you, is it, the practical one?" "Yes. Someone needs to think about the future. Your future, Dad. You can't keep going like this. You're one bad fall away from not being able to live independently at all." I gripped the phone tightly. "I appreciate your concern, Michael, but I'm not going anywhere." "God, you're impossible," he muttered, Fine, stay in that falling down house until it collapses around you, but don't expect me to drop everything when you need help getting groceries or making it to doctor's appointments. I would never ask that of you, I said quietly. I know how busy you are with your important job and your important friends. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you visited just to visit, not to try and convince me to change my life to make yours easier? There was a long pause. I'm trying to look out for you, Dad. No, you're trying to solve a problem. And that problem is me. He sighed heavily. This is getting us nowhere. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable. After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the wall where Sarah and I had marked the kids' heights as they grew. Michael's last mark was at 16 before he decided he was too old for such childish traditions. Jessica's continued until she left for college. I made another decision that night. I would tell Jessica about the money first. Not everything, just enough to see how she reacted. I trusted her more than Michael, but even that trust had limits now. The next day was Saturday, Jessica's regular visit with the kids. As they played in the backyard, I asked her to join me on the porch. Is everything okay, Dad? She asked, concerned by my serious expression. You're not sick, are you? No, nothing like that. I took a deep breath. I've had some unexpected good news. Financial news. Her brow furrowed. What kind of financial news? I've come into some money. Not a fortune, I lied, but enough to make a difference. A distant cousin died, left me a bit in his will. The cover story Ms. Winters and I had prepared. Dad, that's wonderful. How much, if you don't mind me asking? About 50,000, I said, watching her face closely. Jessica's eyes widened, but not with greed, with genuine happiness for me. That's amazing. You could fix the roof, maybe take a vacation? You haven't been anywhere since Mom died. I was thinking I might help with Emma and Liam's college funds, I said cautiously. Her expression softened. Dad, that's incredibly generous, but it's your money. You should use it for yourself. What would make me happy is knowing my grandkids are taken care of. Jessica reached over and squeezed my hand. You're already the best grandfather they could ask for. That's worth more than any college fund. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching Emma pushing Liam on the old tire swing I'd hung from the oak tree decades ago. Have you told Michael? She finally asked. Not yet. She nodded, understanding without me having to explain. He means well, you know. He's just, Michael. Everything's a problem to be solved. Some things aren't problems, I said softly. They're just life. The following Wednesday, exactly 3 weeks after the drawing, Ms. Winters called to inform me everything was in place. The trust had been established, the claim had been processed and verified, and the funds would be transferred within days. There would be a press conference the following Monday, a requirement of the Michigan Lottery for jackpots of this size. We can delay it a few days if you need more time, she offered. No, I decided. Let's get it over with. That evening, I called Michael. Our conversation was strained after our last argument, but I managed to ask him if he could come to Detroit on Monday for something important. Dad, I have meetings all day Monday. Can it wait until next weekend? It's important, Michael. Family important. There was a pause. Are you okay? Is this a health thing? I'm fine. Better than fine. But I need both you and Jessica there. You're being very mysterious. Trust me. It'll be worth the trip. After some back and forth, he agreed to drive in Monday morning. I called Jessica next and made the same request, though she didn't need nearly as much convincing. Sunday night I barely slept, my mind churning with doubts and second thoughts. Was I doing the right thing? Would the money destroy what remained of my relationship with Michael? Would it change how Jessica saw me? Would my grandchildren grow up spoiled and entitled? Too late for doubts now, I told myself as dawn broke. The wheels were in motion. Monday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the one I'd worn to Sarah's funeral, and drove downtown to the lottery headquarters, where Ms. Winters was waiting. The press conference was surreal. Cameras flashed as I held an oversized check with an amount of money I still couldn't quite comprehend. I kept my statement brief, saying only that I was grateful for this blessing and looked forward to helping my family and community. I didn't mention my children or grandchildren by name, following Ms. Winters' advice. Afterward, as agreed, I was whisked away in a hired car to avoid the reporters who would inevitably try to follow me home. Instead, we went to Ms. Winters' office, where Michael and Jessica would be meeting me at noon. They arrived separately. Jessica 5 minutes early, Michael 10 minutes late. Both looked confused and concerned as Ms. Winters's assistant showed them into the conference room where I waited. "Dad, what's going on?" Jessica asked immediately. "Why are we meeting at a law office, and why did you tell me not to bring the kids?" Michael was more suspicious. "Is everything okay with your will? Is that what this is about?" Before I could answer, Ms. Winters entered, introducing herself and asking everyone to sit. I nodded for her to proceed as planned. "Mr. Donovan has asked me to share some significant news with you both," she began, her professional demeanor giving nothing away. 3 weeks ago, your father won the Mega Millions jackpot of $315 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Jessica's mouth fell open. Michael looked from Ms. Winters to me and back again as if waiting for the punchline. "That's not possible," he finally said. "Dad buys 1 lottery ticket a week. The odds of winning are 1 in 302,075 350. Ms. Winters finished for him. "And yet here we are." She slid a copy of the press release across the table. "This went out to media outlets 30 minutes ago." Jessica grabbed the paper, her hands trembling slightly. "Dad, is this real?" I nodded. "It's real, sweetheart." Michael was still processing, his financial advisor brain no doubt calculating the exact figures. "After taxes, that's what, 110 million? 120 million? Approximately 110 million, Ms. Winters confirmed. "The funds have been placed in a trust with your father as the primary beneficiary and trustee." "Why didn't you tell us right away?" Jessica asked, her voice small. I met her gaze steadily. "I needed time to think, to plan, to decide what I wanted to do with it." "And what have you decided?" Michael asked, his tone unreadable. Ms. Winters opened a folder and removed several documents. "Mr. Donovan has established trusts for both of you, as well as for Emma and Liam," she explained, nodding to Jessica. "The children's trusts will provide for their education and give them each a significant sum when they turn 25, with additional disbursements at 30 and 35. Jessica was openly crying now. "Dad, this is too much." "It's what your mother would have wanted," I said simply. Ms. Winters continued. "Additionally, there are provisions for both of you to receive annual payments from the trust, starting immediately." "How much?" Michael asked bluntly. $250,000 per year each, Ms. Winters replied, watching their reactions closely. Jessica gasped. Michael's expression remained carefully neutral, but I saw the calculation in his eyes. "There are conditions," I added, leaning forward. "The annual payments are contingent on certain requirements being met." Now Michael frowned. "What kind of requirements?" I took a deep breath. "For you, Michael. It's simple. The payments will continue as long as you never again suggest I sell my house or move into any kind of assisted living facility unless I bring it up first." His face flushed. "Dad, it's my money, and those are my terms," I interrupted. "I will live in my home on my own terms. For as long as I am physically and mentally able, I'll hire help if I need it. I'll make modifications to the house if necessary, but the decision will be mine alone." Michael fell silent, his jaw working as he processed this. "And me?" Jessica asked quietly. "What are my conditions?" I smiled at her. "Just that you bring the kids around at least twice a month, same as you do now, and that you use some of the money to take care of yourself, not just them." Her tears flowed freely now. "I don't even know what to say." "There's more," Ms. Winters continued, explaining the additional provisions I'd established: charitable foundations, scholarships in Sarah's name at the local community college, funds set aside for my future healthcare needs. Michael listened with growing interest, occasionally asking detailed financial questions that Ms. Winters handled expertly. When she finished, there was a long silence. Finally, Michael spoke. "I want to apologize, Dad. I was wrong to push you about the house. I was worried about you, but I handled it badly." I studied my son's face, trying to determine if his contrition was genuine or motivated by the prospect of $250,000 a year. Perhaps it was both. People were complicated that way. "Apology accepted," I said simply. Jessica moved to hug me, still crying. "I can't believe this. It doesn't feel real." "It'll sink in," I assured her. "Take your time. There's no rush to make any decisions or changes." Michael remained seated, his expression thoughtful. "What will you do now, Dad? With your share, I mean." It was the question I'd been asking myself for 3 weeks. What does a 67-year-old widower with simple tastes do with a 9-figure bank account? First, I'm quitting the hardware store, I said with a small smile. Beyond that, I'll keep living my life, fix up the house properly, maybe travel a bit. Nothing too extravagant. You could do anything, go anywhere, Michael pointed out. I'm exactly where I want to be. As we left Ms. Winter's office an hour later, having signed preliminary paperwork and scheduled follow-up meetings, Michael pulled me aside in the hallway. Dad, I need to ask, why the condition about the house? Do you really think I'd still pressure you now that money isn't an issue? I looked my son in the eye. It was never about money, Michael. It was about respect, about recognizing that I'm still capable of making my own decisions. He had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't see it that way. I thought I was helping. I know you did, but sometimes the best help you can give someone is to let them help themselves. Outside, the October sun was warm against my face. Jessica hugged me again before we parted ways, whispering thank you and I love you through her tears. Michael shook my hand, then surprised me by pulling me into an awkward embrace. I'm proud of you, Dad, he said, his voice rough with emotion. For what it's worth. It was worth more than he knew. I drove home in my old truck, knowing it would be the last time. Not because I planned to buy some luxury vehicle, though I probably would get something newer and safer, but because I wouldn't be able to drive anywhere unnoticed after today. By tomorrow, everyone in Riverdale would know about the lottery win. My quiet life was over. As I pulled into my driveway, Mrs. Henderson from next door was already hurrying across her lawn toward me, newspaper in hand, her face alight with excitement. Frank, is it true? The paper says you won the Mega Millions. And so it begins. I thought, but found myself smiling as I climbed down from the truck. It's true, Eleanor. My stars, what will you do with all that money? I looked up at my modest home, thinking of all the memories it held, all the years of hard work it represented. The house where Sarah and I had raised our children, where we'd laughed and fought and loved. The house that Michael had thought was no longer good enough for me. I'm going to live, Eleanor, I said simply. On my own terms. That night I sat on my porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. My phone had been ringing non-stop. Old friends, distant relatives, local reporters all wanting to talk to the lucky winner. I'd turned it off after speaking with Jessica one last time. In the morning, I would begin my new life as a wealthy man. There would be challenges I couldn't yet imagine, complications and opportunities beyond my current understanding. I would make mistakes. I would learn. I would grow. But tonight, in this moment, I was simply Frank Donovan, sitting on the porch of the home I'd worked my whole life to own, finally free from financial worry, but more importantly, free from others' expectations of what my life should be. Sarah would have loved the irony of it all. You need help for everything now, Michael had said just weeks ago. And now, through a twist of fate so unlikely it defied comprehension, I was in a position to help everyone else instead. I closed my eyes and imagined Sarah beside me on this swing, her hand in mine, as it had been for 40 years. What would you do? I whispered to the empty space beside me. The evening breeze rustled the oak leaves overhead, and I could almost hear her practical voice. First, get some sleep. Decisions made in exhaustion are rarely good ones. With a deep sigh, I pushed myself up from the swing and headed inside, ignoring the blinking light on my answering machine that indicated at least a dozen messages. Tomorrow would be soon enough to face the world. Sleep didn't come easily despite my exhaustion. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with possibilities, concerns, and plans. When I finally drifted off near dawn, I dreamed of Sarah, young and vibrant, laughing as we counted out pennies to pay our first month's rent on a tiny apartment back in 1978. We're rich, she had joked then, when we discovered an extra $5 we hadn't accounted for. Dinner's on us tonight. We really had been rich in all the ways that mattered. The insistent ringing of my doorbell woke me just after 8. Groggily, I pulled on my robe and shuffled to the door, peering through the peephole to see a cluster of reporters on my front step, cameras at the ready. I stepped back, suddenly aware of my new reality. This was just the beginning. I called Ms. Winters, who immediately arranged for a security service to keep the media at a respectful distance. By noon, a professional-looking man named Keith was stationed at the end of my driveway, politely but firmly turning away the curious and the opportunistic. "This is temporary," he assured me when I brought him a glass of iced tea. "Once the initial excitement dies down, they'll move on to the next big story." I wasn't so sure, but I thanked him anyway. That afternoon, Jessica arrived with Emma and Liam, navigating through the small crowd of lingering reporters with a protective arm around each child. "Grandpa's famous," Liam exclaimed as I ushered them quickly inside. "Not famous, buddy," I corrected him. "Just temporarily interesting to people who like stories about lucky old men." Emma, more perceptive at 10, studied my face. "Are you still our same grandpa? Mom says you're super rich now." I knelt down, ignoring the protest in my knees, and took her small hands in mine. "I'm exactly the same person I was last week, Emma. I just have more money in the bank, that's all." She considered this solemnly before nodding. "Good, because I like regular grandpa." "Me too, kiddo, me too." Jessica looked exhausted. "It's been non-stop calls since last night. Everyone from elementary school classmates I haven't spoken to in 20 years to my ex-husband suddenly wants to reconnect." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "I didn't think through how this would affect you and the kids." She shook her head. "Don't apologize. We'll figure it out." She lowered her voice as the children wandered into the living room. "Michael called me this morning. He sounded different." "Different how?" "Humbled, maybe?" "He asked if I thought you'd actually hold him to the conditions in the trust. He's worried about slipping up and saying the wrong thing about your living situation." I couldn't help but smile slightly. "Good. Let him worry for a while." "Dad, I'm not being vindictive, Jess, but Michael needs to understand that my independence isn't a problem to be solved. It's something to be respected." She sighed. "I know, just be gentle with him. This is a lot for all of us to process." The kids stayed for dinner, pizza delivery since I wasn't up to cooking. We played board games afterward, and for a few hours things felt almost normal. Almost. After they left, promising to return on Saturday as usual, I finally checked my messages. 23 in all, ranging from heartfelt congratulations from old work buddies to thinly veiled solicitations from investment advisors and charities I'd never heard of. The last one was from Michael. "Dad, it's me. I've been thinking a lot since yesterday about what you said about respect. You're right, and I'm sorry, really sorry. I'd like to come by this weekend just to talk. No agenda, no suggestions about your living situation. Just talk, like we used to. Call me back when you can." His voice sounded sincere, though the cynical part of me wondered if the prospect of losing $250,000 a year was the primary motivator. Still, it was a start. The next morning, I met with a financial advisor Ms. Winters had recommended, someone accustomed to working with clients who had come into sudden wealth. Arnold Pearson was older than me by at least a decade, with a no-nonsense demeanor I appreciated. "Most lottery winners are broke within 5 years," he told me bluntly as we sat in his downtown office. "They make emotional decisions instead of rational ones. They say yes to everyone who asks. They buy things they don't need to impress people they don't like." "I'm not most lottery winners," I replied. "I've lived within my means for 67 years. I don't see that changing now." Arnold's weathered face creased in a smile. "That's what they all say. But let's plan as if you mean it." For the next 2 hours, we discussed investment strategies, tax implications, and wealth preservation techniques. The details were sometimes overwhelming, but I appreciated his direct approach and lack of condescension. By the end of our meeting, I had a clearer picture of how to manage my newfound wealth responsibly. "One last thing," Arnold said as I prepared to leave. "You need to decide how accessible you want to be. Every long-lost relative, former colleague, and neighbor will suddenly remember how close you once were. Everyone will have a sad story or a brilliant business opportunity. You can't help them all, and if you try, you'll end up helping none of them. What do you suggest? Establish clear boundaries now. Decide on your priorities. And don't be afraid to say no." It was good advice, and I mulled it over as Keith drove me home in the secure car service Ms. Winters had arranged. The media presence outside my house had doubled since morning, with news vans now parked along the street. Keith escorted me inside through the back door, promising to remain on duty until the replacement arrived at 8. Once alone, I surveyed my modest living room with new eyes. The worn sofa where Sarah and I had spent countless evenings watching TV, the faded recliner that had molded itself to my body over decades, the scratched coffee table where my grandchildren now colored and did puzzles. Nothing here was valuable in monetary terms, but everything held the richness of memory. I could replace it all now. Buy designer furniture, state-of-the-art electronics, even a larger house in a gated community where reporters couldn't camp on the sidewalk. But something in me resisted the idea. This was home. My home. The home Michael had thought wasn't good enough for me anymore. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway, half expecting another reporter. "Mr. Donovan," the voice was female, professional. "This is Dr. Eleanor Chen from Detroit Mercy Hospital. I'm calling about your application to our senior volunteer program. I'd almost forgotten. 3 weeks ago, before the lottery win, I'd applied to volunteer at the hospital's geriatric ward, reading to patients and providing companionship. It had seemed like a good way to fill my days after retirement." "Yes, Dr. Chen, I remember. We'd love to have you join us if you're still interested. Orientation is next Tuesday at 10 a.m. I hesitated only briefly. "I'll be there." "Wonderful. I'll email you the details." After hanging up, I sat quietly, turning over this new development in my mind. Would they still want me as a volunteer once they realized who I was? Would the patients treat me differently? Would I be a distraction rather than a help? But then I thought of all the lonely elderly patients who might benefit from a friendly face and a kind word. Money couldn't buy that kind of human connection, and maybe, just maybe, those quiet hours of service would help keep me grounded in what truly mattered. I called Jessica to tell her about the volunteer position. She was supportive, but concerned. "Are you sure you want to commit to that now, Dad? You're going to be so busy dealing with all of this." I could hear the gentle worry in her voice. "All the more reason to have something normal and meaningful to do," I replied. "I don't want my whole life to become about managing money." "I understand. Just take care of yourself, okay? It's a lot of change all at once." After we hung up, I found myself staring at Michael's number in my phone contacts. Despite our complicated relationship, he was still my son, and he had reached out. Before I could overthink it, I pressed call. "Dad?" He answered on the second ring, sounding surprised. "I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. You said you wanted to talk," I replied simply. "How about Saturday afternoon? Jessica's bringing the kids in the morning, but you could come by around 3. There was a brief pause. "I'd like that. Thank you." The formality between us felt strange, but it was better than the condescension that had characterized our recent interactions. And Michael, "Leave the financial advisor hat at home, just come as my son." "I will," he promised, "and see you Saturday." Friday brought my first taste of the bizarre side effects of sudden wealth. First, a local car dealership sent a salesman to my door with a brochure for their luxury models, offering a special discount for Michigan's newest millionaire. Then came emails from 3 different investment firms, her charity I'd never heard of, and someone claiming to be a distant cousin from my mother's side who needed help with medical bills. By mid-afternoon, I was thoroughly overwhelmed. Following Arnold's advice, I hired a personal assistant, a no-nonsense retired school administrator named Martha, who promised to filter my communications and keep the opportunists at bay. "You need a buffer between you and the world for a while," she explained during our interview in my kitchen. "Someone to say no so you don't have to." "That sounds perfect," I admitted. "I've never been good at saying no." Martha's efficiency was impressive. Within hours, she had set up a new email account for me, changed my phone number, and created a system for evaluating requests. She also gently suggested I consider moving, at least temporarily, to a location where I wasn't known. "Just until the media frenzy dies down," she explained. "You could rent a place for a few months, get some peace and quiet." The idea had merit, but I resisted. "This is my home, Martha. I'm not leaving because some reporters are camped outside." She nodded, respecting my decision even as her expression suggested she thought I was being stubborn. Maybe I was, but after Michael's persistent attempts to get me to move, I was particularly sensitive to any suggestion that I should leave my house. Saturday morning brought Jessica and the kids as promised. The children seemed to have adjusted to their grandfather's newfound celebrity, treating it as an amusing oddity rather than a life-changing event. "My teacher asked if you were my grandpa," Emma reported as she helped me make pancakes. I said yes, and she said that was fascinating. "Why is it fascinating, Grandpa?" "People are curious about luck," I explained, measuring flour into a bowl. "They wonder why some people win and others don't." "Is that why there are still people with cameras outside?" I nodded. "They'll get bored eventually." "People always do." "Mum says we might need to go to a different school," Liam chimed in from the table, where he was methodically arranging silverware. "Because some kids are being weird." I glanced at Jessica, who was pretending to be absorbed in pouring orange juice. "Is that true, Jess?" she sighed. We've had a few incidents, nothing serious. Just some parents suddenly wanting playdates who never showed interest before. A couple of comments about how nice it would be if Emma and Liam could bring expensive treats for the class. My heart sank. I'm sorry. Don't be, we're figuring it out. She smiled reassuringly. Besides, I've already scheduled tours at 3 private schools for next week. Might as well use some of that trust money for education, right? After breakfast, we played board games and watched a movie. The normality of it was comforting, even with the occasional flash of a camera visible through the curtains. At 2:30, Jessica gathered the children to leave, knowing Michael was coming soon. Be nice, she whispered as she hugged me goodbye. Both of you. I'm always nice, I protested mildly. She gave me a knowing look. Uh-huh. Sure you are. Michael arrived exactly at 3, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater rather than his usual business attire. He carried a small paper bag which he handed to me after an awkward greeting. Fresh bagels from Kaufman's, he explained. I remembered they're your favorite. Indeed they were. A small detail I was surprised he recalled. Thank you. Coffee? Please. We settled at the kitchen table, the bagels between us. An uncomfortable silence stretching as we each waited for the other to speak. Finally, Michael cleared his throat. I've been doing a lot of thinking since Monday, about how I've treated you these past few years. I sipped my coffee, giving him space to continue. After Mum died, I was scared, he admitted. I kept picturing you alone in this house falling, getting sick with no one to help. And instead of asking how I could support you while respecting your independence, I tried to take control, to solve the problem my way. That sounds about right, I agreed, but without rancor. He stared into his coffee cup. I should have listened to you, should have trusted that you know what's best for your own life. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I'm sorry, Dad. Really sorry. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Whatever his motivations, the money, genuine remorse, or some combination, the apology itself seemed heartfelt. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It means a lot. I don't want our relationship to be about money, he continued. If you want to change the trust conditions, remove the financial penalty. I held up a hand to stop him. The conditions stay, Michael. Not because I don't accept your apology, but because they provide clarity. Clear boundaries that will help us rebuild trust. He nodded slowly. I understand, and I'll respect them. Not because of the money, but because I respect you. We talked for nearly 3 hours after that, longer than we had in years. About his work, about Jessica and the kids, about my volunteer position at the hospital. He told me about the pressure he felt at his firm, the constant drive to bring in more wealthy clients, the toll it was taking on his personal life. I shared stories about Sarah that he'd never heard, small moments from our marriage that I'd treasured privately until now. As evening approached, Michael helped me prepare a simple dinner of pasta and salad. We ate at the kitchen table, the conversation flowing more naturally now. What will you do with the money, Dad? He finally asked. Besides the trusts and foundations you've already set up? I twirled pasta around my fork. Considering. I haven't decided completely. Fix up the house, certainly. Travel a bit, maybe. But mostly, I want to use it to create more time. Time? Time to volunteer. Time to spend with you and Jessica and the kids. Time to finally read all those books Sarah kept buying me that I was saving for retirement. I smiled slightly. Money can't buy time, exactly, but it can remove the obstacles that steal it away. Michael nodded thoughtfully. That's actually profound, Dad. Don't sound so surprised. Your old man has his moments. He laughed, and for an instant I caught a glimpse of the boy he had been before the prestigious college. The high-pressure career, the tailored suits and calculated ambition had reshaped him. As he prepared to leave, Michael hesitated at the door. Would it be okay if I came by next weekend? Maybe we could watch a Tigers game like we used to. I'd like that, I replied, surprised by how much I meant it. After he left, I sat alone in my living room processing the day. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Perhaps the money, for all its complications, would create space for healing what had been broken between us. Sunday morning, I awoke to find the media presence outside had diminished considerably. Either they'd gotten their fill of photos of an ordinary-looking older man, or some more interesting news story had broken elsewhere. Either way, I was grateful for the respite. Martha had arranged for a home security consultation on Monday and a meeting with a contractor to discuss renovations on Tuesday afternoon. My calendar, once populated mainly by shifts at the hardware store and occasional doctor's appointments, was suddenly filling with meetings and obligations. But today was still mine. I made myself a leisurely breakfast, then spent the morning sorting through old photographs in the attic, pictures of Sarah, of the children when they were young, of the life we had built together. I selected several to be framed and displayed, treasures far more valuable than anything money could buy. In the afternoon, I drove to the cemetery where Sarah was buried. The security guard Keith followed discreetly in another car, giving me privacy, while ensuring no reporters interrupted this personal moment. Sarah's grave was simple, a granite headstone with her name, the dates that marked her too short life, and the inscription we had chosen together during those final, painful weeks. Love endures all things. I sat on the bench beside her grave, the late October sun warm against my face. You wouldn't believe what's happened, I said softly, feeling only slightly foolish for talking aloud. Sarah and I had always been able to discuss anything, and in some ways, that hadn't changed with her death. Remember those lottery tickets you always teased me about? Well, turns out they weren't such a waste after all. I told her everything. The win, Michael's prior condescension, the trusts, the meetings with lawyers and financial advisors, the media attention, Jessica's concerns about the children, the tentative reconciliation with Michael. I wish you were here to help me figure it all out, I finished, my voice thick with emotion. You always knew what to do. The wind rustled the nearby oak trees, sending a shower of golden leaves spiraling down around me. I caught one, turning it over in my palm, a perfect maple leaf, its stem still intact. I'll take that as a sign you're listening, I murmured, carefully tucking the leaf into my wallet. On my way home, I made an impulsive decision and directed Keith to drive me to Detroit Mercy Hospital. The administrative offices would be closed on Sunday, but I wanted to see the place where I'd be volunteering, to remind myself that some things in my life would remain grounded in simple human connection rather than financial concerns. The hospital was quiet, the Sunday afternoon lull in full effect. I walked through the main entrance, noting the worn furniture in the waiting area, the slightly faded paint on the walls. This was a working hospital that served many of Detroit's neediest citizens, not one of the gleaming private facilities that catered to the wealthy. As I stood there, an idea began to form, a way to honor Sarah, who had spent her final weeks in a hospital not unlike this one, a way to use my unexpected fortune to create something lasting and meaningful. By the time I returned home, the idea had solidified into a plan. First thing Monday, I would call Ms. Winters to discuss establishing a foundation to support improvements in geriatric and palliative care at Detroit's public hospitals. The Sarah Donovan Memorial Fund would ensure that others received the dignity and comfort in their final days that I had tried so hard to provide for my wife. That evening, as I sat on my porch swing watching the sunset, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. The money itself meant little to me. I had lived a full life without wealth and could have continued to do so, but the opportunity it provided to make a difference, to leave a legacy beyond myself, that was the true windfall. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Kids want to know if you'll come to their school play next Friday. Emma's a tree, and Liam's a conceptual representation of the wind, his teacher's words, not mine. Dinner after? We can avoid the reporters. I smiled, typing back, wouldn't miss it for the world. As darkness fell, I thought about Michael's words from just weeks ago. You need help for everything now. The irony wasn't lost on me. Through a twist of fate so unlikely it defied comprehension, I was now in a position to help everyone else instead. Life had a funny way of evening the score sometimes. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more decisions, more adjustments to my new reality, but I was ready to face them, to build something meaningful from this unexpected blessing, not just for myself or my family, but for others who needed a helping hand, not a handout, but a chance for dignity, independence, and purpose, the very things I had fought so hard to maintain for myself. Because in the end, we all need help sometimes. The trick is recognizing the difference between helping someone up and pushing them aside. The porch swing creaked gently as I rocked, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring chaos and change and opportunity, but tonight I had peace, and that I knew with absolute certainty was worth more than all the millions in the world. 6 months after the lottery win, my life had found a new rhythm. The media frenzy had died down as Keith had predicted. though I still occasionally spotted a photographer when I ventured into downtown Detroit. The renovations on my house were complete. Nothing extravagant, just necessary updates to the plumbing, electrical system and roof, plus a few modifications to make it more accessible as I aged. The kitchen, where Sarah had taught both children to bake cookies, was now equipped with state-of-the-art appliances. But I'd insisted on keeping the worn wooden table where we'd shared thousands of family meals. The Sarah Donovan Memorial Fund was officially established and already making a difference at 3 Detroit hospitals. The geriatric ward at Detroit Mercy, where I still volunteered twice a week, had new beds, a renovated common area, and additional staff specifically trained to provide companionship and emotional support to elderly patients with few visitors. The palliative care unit where Sarah had spent her final weeks now offered private rooms for all patients and their families, with comfortable furniture that converted to beds, so loved ones could stay overnight. Jessica had moved with the children to a larger house in a gated community where they had more privacy and security. Emma and Liam were thriving at their new school, though Jessica was careful to keep them grounded, continuing to assign chores and maintain reasonable allowances despite our family's changed circumstances. Michael and I had settled into a cautious new relationship. He visited every other weekend, and we'd found common ground in following the Tigers' baseball season together. He'd been scrupulously careful never to mention my living situation or suggest changes to my independence, honoring the trust conditions with surprising grace. More importantly, he seemed to be re-evaluating his own life priorities, gradually reducing his work hours and talking about possibly switching to a less demanding position that would allow him more personal time. As for me, I'd found purpose in managing the foundation and my volunteer work. The elderly patients I read to each week didn't care about my bank account. They cared about the time and attention I gave them, the dignity with which I treated them, the stories we shared. Many had led remarkable lives that were now largely forgotten by a society that often overlooked its seniors. I made it my mission to listen, to remember, and when possible, to record their histories for future generations. My favorite patient was Walter Jenkins, a 94-year-old former Motown session musician who had played piano behind some of the greatest soul singers of the 1960s. His fingers were now gnarled with arthritis, but his mind remained sharp, his stories vivid. I'd arranged for a documentary filmmaker to interview him, preserving his unique perspective on a pivotal era in American music. "How you're different from most rich folks I've known," Walter told me one afternoon as I helped him adjust his position in bed. "You still got dirt under your fingernails, metaphorically speaking." I smiled at his assessment. "I was 67 when I got money, Walter. Hard to change who you are at that point." "Plenty try," he observed shrewdly. "Seen it happen. Money has a way of making people forget where they came from." "Not me," I assured him. "Never that." On a warm Saturday in April, nearly 7 months after the win, I hosted a family barbecue in my backyard. Jessica and the kids arrived early to help set up. Michael came bearing expensive steaks and craft beer, and several neighbors who had remained genuine friends despite my changed circumstances joined us as well. As I stood at the grill, watching Emma and Liam playing catch with Michael on the lawn, I felt Sarah's absence acutely. She would have loved this. The family together, the laughter, the simple pleasure of a spring day. I touched the wedding ring I still wore, silently including her in the moment. Jessica appeared at my elbow, handing me a cold lemonade. "You okay, Dad? You looked far away for a minute there." "Just thinking about your mom," I admitted. "How much she would have enjoyed today." Jessica slipped her arm around my waist, leaning her head against my shoulder. "She's here in all the ways that matter, in how you've used the money to help others, in how you've brought the family back together." "You think so?" "I know so." She squeezed gently before stepping back. "She'd be proud of you, Dad. Of all of us, really." Later, as we sat around the patio table enjoying strawberry shortcake, Sarah's recipe, which Jessica had insisted on making, Michael cleared his throat. "I have some news," he announced, setting down his fork. "I've accepted a new position at the firm. Less client acquisition, more mentoring of junior advisors. It means a pay cut, but also a saner schedule." "That's wonderful," Jessica exclaimed. "You've been burning the candle at both ends for too long." Michael nodded, glancing at me. "Someone wise once told me that money can't buy time, but it can remove the obstacles that steal it away. I've been thinking about that a lot lately." I felt a surge of fatherly pride. recognizing my own words. Sounds like a smart guy. He has his moments, Michael replied with a small smile, echoing our exchange from months earlier. As evening approached and our guests departed, I found myself alone with my children, sitting on the porch swing that had become my favorite spot for reflection. The security system installed months ago blinked quietly from its control panel, a subtle reminder of how much had changed. "I've been thinking about taking a trip," I said, as we watched the fireflies begin to emerge in the gathering dusk. "Maybe to Italy. Your mother always wanted to see Venice." "That sounds wonderful." "Dad," Jessica said, "when would you go?" "Late summer, maybe. And I was hoping you might all come with me. You, the kids, Michael. Make it a family trip." Michael and Jessica exchanged surprised glances. "I'd love that," Jessica said immediately. "The kids have never been abroad. It would be an amazing experience for them." Michael hesitated. "I'd need to arrange time off, but yes, I'd like that very much." We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the neighborhood settle into evening. A year ago, such a trip would have been financially impossible. Now it was a simple matter of making arrangements. The contrast wasn't lost on any of us. "It's strange," Michael finally said. "All those years I spent worrying about your financial security, trying to convince you to downsize, to be practical, and now I could buy this whole block if I wanted to," I finished for him. "Life has a way of surprising us." "Do you ever think about how different things might be if you hadn't won?" Jessica asked. "If you were still working at the hardware store, still struggling with bills?" "Every day," I admitted. "But I like to think some things would be the same, that we'd still be finding our way back to being a family, that I'd still be looking for ways to honor your mother's memory, that I'd still be fighting to maintain my independence and dignity." "The money just makes it all easier," Michael observed. "In some ways," I agreed, "and more complicated in others. But at the end of the day, the most valuable things in my life were never about money at all." As darkness fell completely, I looked at my children, now middle-aged themselves, but always my children in my heart, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not for the lottery win, though that had certainly changed our lives in remarkable ways, but for this moment of connection, of understanding, of family bonds reinforced rather than broken by unexpected wealth. "I love you both," I said simply, "more than any amount of money could ever express." Jessica squeezed my hand. Michael nodded, emotion evident in his eyes even in the dim porch light. We sat together until the stars were fully visible above us, three people connected by blood and history, and a future that seemed brighter than it had in years. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and wealth brought its own unique set of problems, we would face them together, with clear eyes and open hearts. The lottery win hadn't created this moment, I realized. It had simply cleared away the distractions and worries that might have prevented it from happening. The money was a tool, nothing more. What we built with it, that was the true measure of its worth. As Jessica and Michael prepared to leave, making plans for our next Sunday dinner, I felt a sense of completion that had eluded me since Sarah's death. Not an ending, but a new beginning. A chapter written not in dollars and cents, but in moments of connection, in purpose rediscovered, in dignity preserved. And that, I knew with bone-deep certainty, was the greatest jackpot of all. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.